She came home glowing, not the soft, love-warmed kind, but the slick confidence of someone who had already moved on and just hadn't bothered to tell me. She tossed her bag on the kitchen island like nothing had changed. "We're just on different levels now," she said, the way someone might comment on weather. Calm. Icy. Final. I stood at the sink, rinsing out a coffee mug I hadn't even finished. That sentence hit like a scalpel, not a hammer, clean, precise, and meant to cut without mess. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. She had a look about her, the outfit, the phone that buzzed and lit up too often, the perfume she hadn't worn for me in over a year. I didn't ask questions, not that night. I simply noted everything. Details always matter more than emotion when the ground shifts like that. The next morning, I opened LinkedIn over breakfast. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted to believe she'd post something about moving on, about self-discovery, something generic and quietly cruel. Instead, I saw his face. CEO, 3 letters. $100 million in capital raised last quarter. And in the post photo, her hand on his chest, her smile sharper than I'd ever seen. Caption: excited to build something real with my new partner, in every sense of the word. Partner, not boyfriend. Partner. She knew exactly what she was doing. I dropped my spoon back into the cereal bowl and stared at the screen. The man beside her had a name I hadn't heard in years, but I knew the face instantly. Dalton Myers. Same industry. Same city. 10 years younger than his image. He looked older now, more polished, but not enough to fool me. I'd trained him. Back when I was doing workshops on early-stage funding strategies for junior founders. Back before she ever met him. Back when she used to sit in the front row of my lectures, eyes locked on me like I was the only person in the room. I didn't comment, didn't message her, didn't close the app either. I just let the image sink in, her arm around a man who used to call me, sir, in pitch meetings. The same man who'd once asked if he could shadow me for a quarter to absorb the nuances. Apparently he'd absorbed more than that. Later that day, I scrolled through her older posts, carefully curated smiles, event check-ins, ambitious hashtags. It was all there in hindsight. The gradual erasure of me, masked as growth. Motivational quotes. Surround yourself with people who match your future, not your past. That one stood out. She posted it 2 weeks before she told me we'd grown apart. I spent the evening doing what I hadn't let myself do in years. Rewinding. Not just memories. Emails. Calendar overlaps. Photos with metadata. I didn't have a goal yet. Not retaliation. Not even truth. Just clarity. Clarity makes you dangerous, especially when you're quiet. That night, I lay on the couch and watched the ceiling fan spin. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. That would have been easy. What I felt was simpler, the beginning of distance. Something cracking loose from my ribs. Something that used to anchor me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want her to come back. It wasn't her post that broke the story open. That had been crafted, manicured, approved, filtered. She knew how to stage an image when the lighting was right and the caption polished just enough to sting. But her friend's story? That was sloppier. And sloppy is where the truth lives. I found it 2 nights later while scrolling through the event pages of a luxury gala I hadn't even known was happening. I wasn't invited. I used to be on those lists, back when she and I were still seen as the couple with potential. I searched the event's name on social media out of idle bitterness, not strategy. But what came up stopped me cold. A blurry photo posted by her old college roommate, a woman who used to drink at our house on Sundays and complain about dating men who wore shoes without socks. The image caught them mid-laugh, her hand wrapped tightly around his bicep, head tilted like she'd known him forever. The caption was quick and unfiltered. Power couple era. A lazy joke, maybe, but the date burned. It was posted nearly 2 weeks before she told me we needed space. Before she came home with that smug declaration about different levels, 2 weeks before the official goodbye, and she hadn't even tried to hide it. I zoomed in. Her dress was one I'd complimented a few days before she decided to find herself. I remembered the scent she wore that night. Jasmine and something faintly chemical. She'd returned late, said the gala ran over. Networking, she called it. She'd come home glowing. I kept the image. Screenshot. Saved. Duplicated. Metadata backed up. Not because I planned to do anything, not yet, but because I knew what people do when caught. They erase. They deny. and she would rewrite this if I let her. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my business partner, Erin, who had started asking questions about why she wasn't showing up to joint meetings anymore. She and I had once built our entire client pitch on the idea of tandem vision, a united front with different strengths. Now, she was using that same strategy to court investors without me. I knew that because I checked our shared calendar, and saw entries that were identical to the ones I'd created a month ago. Same contacts, same venues. Different names on the invites now. Hers. And his. It wasn't romantic betrayal anymore. It was strategic removal. She wasn't just leaving me, she was replacing me. Efficiently, quietly, with someone I had once mentored. I started cross-checking our CRM logs against her recent movements. She'd downloaded client lists 2 weeks before the split, forwarded PDFs I'd compiled on market behavior. She even used my old slide deck. I recognized a typo I'd never corrected. She was building her new image with the bones of what I'd constructed. Still, I said nothing. Played the professional. Showed up to meetings. Smiled when someone asked about her. I even liked her post, the one with the CEO, the hand on his chest, the nauseating word. Partner. I wanted her to think I was behind, still stunned, still licking wounds. Because there's something about silence that unnerves people who rely on perception. And I could tell, from the way she hadn't blocked me, from the way her friends still followed me, that she thought she'd won. But I wasn't mourning anymore. I was mapping. It started with a missed lunch. A mid-tier VC I'd pitched to twice before, someone who had once asked if we could circle back when the timing was right, ghosted our scheduled meeting with no explanation, no reschedule, no reply. Just silence, the kind of silence that feels deliberate. I didn't panic, not then. I assumed something had come up. It happens. People get pulled away. But the second cancellation came 2 days later, this time from a tech consultant who had all but promised to join our advisory board. His assistant sent a 3-line email. Emerging priorities. Let's reconnect in Q3. The kind of phrase that means, you've been replaced, we're just not saying it yet. I called Aaron. He sounded distracted. I thought you said we had traction, he said, not accusatory yet, more like he wanted me to reassure him. We do, I replied, calm. Too calm. But something's shifting. He hesitated, then muttered. I heard Julia was at the Lunar Capital dinner last week. With Dalton. I already knew. I didn't let that show. Yeah, I said simply. He sighed. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of anything personal, but Lunar pulled their interest fast. That's not random. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see it. That week, I noticed a pattern. The same clients who had taken my calls a month ago were now responding with brief, polite rejections, or worse, radio silence. People who had once championed our work were suddenly vague, neutral, avoidant. I knew what it was. It wasn't just her new relationship. It was narrative control. She was rewriting history in rooms I hadn't entered yet. Rooms where Dalton's name carried weight, and mine, apparently, no longer did. That Sunday, I checked our company's email logs. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. But enough to see what was happening. Julia had quietly CC'd herself on several prospect communications before she left, forwarded key proposals. She had our client personas, segmentation strategy, funding calendar, all of it, and then I found it. A deck, almost identical to ours, same title, same flow. Only now, it was rebranded under a different logo, Dalton's company. I opened the file and scrolled. Slide 7 still had my phrasing on it, word for word. This wasn't a breakup. This was erasure. Calculated. Clean. I sat back, the office lights humming above me, and stared at the screen. She hadn't fallen for someone else. She'd calculated the handoff. She saw the next rung of the ladder and reached for it, with my blueprint in her hand. The next day, my mentor stopped replying to texts. He'd introduced me to half the people who now wouldn't take my calls. A week later, I saw him tagged in a photo on Dalton's yacht. Julia in the background, drink in hand. I didn't reach out. Not to confront. Not to plead. What was I going to say? Why are you standing beside the man who's trying to replace me? These men didn't care about fairness. They cared about momentum, perception. And right now, I looked like a man who'd been left behind. But I wasn't standing still. I was listening. Watching. Because when people start removing you from the room, they think you stop existing. But I had time. And I knew something they didn't. She was playing short-term. I'd always played long. 3 months of silence taught me more than confrontation ever could. While she posted about strategy brunches and vision alignment with Dalton, I pulled back, trimmed everything down, leaned out our operations, streamlined our portfolio to our core strengths. Aaron didn't always understand the shift, but he followed my lead. That's when the call came. Private number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was sitting on the back steps of my building, coffee going cold in my hand, staring out at nothing in particular when my phone buzzed again. This time, I picked up. The voice was older, deliberate. Is this Matthew? Yes. This is Richard Myers. I didn't react. Not out loud, but inside something shifted. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Dalton's father. Industry legend. Private. Respected. The kind of man you don't meet until you've proven something, and even then, only if you're lucky. I've heard things, he said simply. Enough to know you haven't spoken. I didn't ask how he got my number. I didn't ask what he meant by things. I just waited. He continued measured. My son isn't ready. And the woman with him, she's not a builder. She's a borrower. That's not judgment, it's observation. My silence was my agreement. He took a breath, then dropped the line that changed everything. I'm finalizing my estate. I don't believe in punishing mistakes, but I also don't reward carelessness. I've watched how you handled all this. Quietly. That speaks to me. I blinked. My coffee had gone from warm to bitter. I didn't care. He didn't rush. Come visit. Stay a while. We'll talk about legacy. It wasn't a request. 2 weeks later, I pulled through the gates of a mansion I'd only seen in press features and whispered stories at networking events. The kind of place built not to impress but to outlast. The staff greeted me like I'd always been expected. A suite was prepared. My name was on a welcome letter in crisp serif font. I didn't unpack fully, not out of modesty, but discipline. I wasn't here for comfort. I was here to listen. Richard was sharper than I expected. Old, yes, but alert, direct. He didn't posture, didn't entertain small talk. He wanted to know how I would handle legacy, stewardship, integrity under pressure. And I told him, not with slogans, but with examples. He already knew the story. All of it. He knew she had used my slides, my contacts, my positioning. He knew Dalton had helped clear the path. He also knew I hadn't leaked a word. Discretion isn't cowardice, he said one night over dinner. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing in the room. The will was signed on a Tuesday. Simple. Precise. My name where his son's used to be. He didn't tell Dalton. Not yet, he said. Let the boy walk into the room thinking it's his. I want to see the moment it breaks. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply said, understood. And for the first time since she walked out, I didn't feel erased. I felt inevitable. The gala was black tie, crisp linens, orchestral string quartet, and enough old money to tip the Earth's axis. I arrived quietly, through the side entrance Richard preferred, guided by a man who addressed me as Mr. Vance, with the kind of gravity usually reserved for surgeons or senators. Dalton and Julia didn't arrive until nearly an hour in. She came in first, bold red dress, diamond earrings that whispered I've arrived. He followed behind her, not leading, but shadowing. I watched from across the room, unnoticed. They worked the crowd like co-anchors. He shook hands, she smiled on cue. I could see her scanning faces, eyes flicking toward anyone holding a camera or compliment. She fed on attention the way some people need oxygen. She didn't notice me. Not at first. The room turned quiet the moment Richard entered. Not in awe, in recognition. He didn't demand space. He simply took it. Every conversation paused. The quartet slowed their tempo, unspoken but synchronized. He walked directly to the stage. The MC tried to resume the scheduled remarks, but Richard raised one hand, just once, and the man stepped back like a chastened intern. He spoke without notes. Tonight's about legacy, he began. Not success. Success can be accidental. Legacy must be earned. Julia leaned into Dalton, whispering something with a smile she thought was discreet. Richard didn't look at them. Not yet. My company is not a brand, he continued. It's a standard, one that outlives any quarter, any name, or any trending article. Then he turned toward them, finally. For years I assumed that standard would carry forward through lineage. I was mistaken. Legacy isn't given, it's chosen. Dalton straightened, the confidence in his posture faltering just slightly. Julia froze. Richard gestured. To that end, he said, I'm announcing my successor. The man who will steward the trust, the holdings, the enterprise, not because of family ties, but because of principle. He motioned toward me. The crowd parted like water around a stone. I stepped forward. Steady. Silent. He didn't look at Julia. He didn't need to. The future belongs to builders, he said. Not borrowers. A camera flashed. Then another. Faces turned to Dalton. Then to her. And back to me. She didn't speak. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes scanned for an exit that didn't exist. I took my place beside Richard. Dalton tried to laugh. Short, forced, but the silence around him was heavier than his reputation could carry. A few of the investors he'd been courting stepped back, ever so slightly. It was over before it started. Later, I stood by the balcony, untouched champagne in my hand. Julia walked past, fast, clipped heels, her expression hollowed out. Our eyes met for half a second. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. There's a language in silence that roars louder than any accusation. And that night, I didn't have to tell anyone who she used to be to me. Because every face in that room already knew. The press didn't run the full story. They never do. Legacy transfers, executive shifts, estate movements, all wrapped in the sterile language of succession planning. But behind the scenes, everything cracked. Dalton's attempts to regain footing were immediate and loud. He tried to call a board meeting. Richard had already dissolved his access to those channels. He issued a statement, something about internal realignment. It read like panic dressed in PowerPoint. But it wasn't the loss of title that broke him. It was the filings. The legal transfer of holdings was finalized within days. Richard had moved with surgical precision. Every asset with influence, every decision gate, every mechanism of control, reassigned, verified, public record. Julia reached out 4 days later. I didn't block her. I let the message sit in my inbox long enough to see the full attempt. I think we should talk. Things unfolded faster than expected. I'm not trying to cause any tension. I just want to understand what's really happening. Understand. As if clarity was something she was owed now. I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. Some messages are better left unread, not for evidence, but for effect. The final blow wasn't delivered by me. It came from Richard himself. A clause, buried in the estate restructuring documents, surfaced in the hands of his legal team. I hadn't known about it until they walked me through the updated governance terms. No individual involved in any personal entanglement with my son during a period of active succession negotiations may inherit, hold, or access trust assets, nor may they derive indirect benefit through relational proximity. That wasn't a warning. That was a locked gate. It didn't name her directly. It didn't have to. The language was precise, legal, surgical, final. I heard through Aaron, who still had contacts in Julia's old circle, that she'd been pulled from 3 advisory panels that week. Conflict of interest, they said publicly. Privately, everyone knew. No one wanted the reputational risk. The calls stopped coming. Invitations dried up. Partners backed out of deals she'd set up. Her new image, power couple, industry star, builder of futures, unraveled under the weight of her borrowed rise. I never gloated. Never posted. Never whispered to her old friends. I didn't need to. One night I passed her name in a private forum, a quiet investor group I'd been newly invited to. A memo circulated. 2 lines. Unverified source integrity. Past reliance on borrowed IP. That was it. No scandal. No expose. Just the quiet burial of her brand. She had climbed quickly, efficiently, without sentiment. But she'd built it all on a structure I no longer occupied, and one that never belonged to her. And now it was gone. Before the gala, before the clause, before her name vanished from panels and group chats, she had a plan. It wasn't subtle. Julia never played quiet for long. Her strategy, as I later learned through back-channel reports and 2 former clients who still respected me enough to share what they heard, was to orchestrate a full acquisition of my company. Not an aggressive one, not officially, but close enough. She'd pitched it as a rescue. A partnership between Dalton's firm and mine, dressed up in buzzwords like synergy and strategic integration. Beneath the gloss, it was a quiet execution. I was meant to fold. They would offer equity, small. Control, none. I'd be brought on as a consultant, stripped of voice but paraded for optics. And the kicker? She'd positioned it as her idea. She knows him. I heard Dalton had said to one investor, she understands how to manage the transition. Manage. Like I was a liability that needed to be quietly shepherded out of relevance. What neither of them knew was that Richard had already shown me the draft emails. He'd intercepted them himself. Your ex, he said one morning, sipping his espresso with surgical calm, believes you'll take the offer out of pride. She thinks being attached to something bigger will quiet the damage. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. My silence told him everything. She doesn't understand builders, he added. Borrowers always underestimate what they didn't help build. The acquisition plan ended the day the will was signed. Richard's holdings, now partially under my stewardship, included minority leverage over Dalton's main capital partner. When I chose not to approve the funding line needed for the acquisition to proceed, the deal evaporated. Dalton scrambled. Julia, from what I heard, tried to salvage it. She even reached out to a shared contact and said, Matt won't say no if he sees the value. He's logical. She never understood the difference between logic and legacy. Logic would have told me to fold, take the deal, pocket the equity, move on. Legacy told me to wait, to hold the line. The memo I sent to the funding committee was 3 sentences long. No emotion, just this. Proposed acquisition does not meet governance thresholds. Recommend no further consideration. Stewardship must remain aligned with founding principles. Clean, unambiguous. Dalton's acquisition team went silent. No press release. No rebuttal. Just nothing. And for a woman who built herself on momentum, silence was more brutal than backlash. She had tried to bury me with the very man I trained. Instead, she ended up buried in the wreckage of a plan built on stolen blueprints and the wrong assumption that I was standing still. It happened just past midnight, the kind of hour where desperation starts to feel justified. I was still in the study, reviewing property schedules and trust documents, when the security alert pinged. Front gate. Unscheduled arrival. I watched from the upstairs window as the car pulled up. Not a sleek town car or ride service, hers. The same one I'd seen her polish meticulously before every networking event, as if the reflection mattered more than the engine. She stepped out slowly, looking up toward the house. I didn't move. I knew exactly where the light would hit me, if she thought to look hard enough. She wore a jacket I remembered, too thin for the hour, probably thrown on in haste. Her heels clicked against the stone as she walked to the gate's intercom. She pressed once, then again. No announcement, no speech, just her voice crackling slightly through the audio. This isn't fair. I stayed still. She glanced toward the camera, brushing hair from her face. Her voice again, lower this time. You don't belong here. I watched her try to stand taller, like posture could make the sentence more believable. I didn't reply. She waited, shifted her weight, looked back at the car, then toward the gate again. This wasn't supposed to happen, she said. There it was. Not an apology, not ownership, just the discomfort of a plan collapsing. I didn't go down, didn't open the line. I didn't need to. The head groundskeeper stepped forward, keyed in the gate code from the inside. It shut with a gentle finality that felt louder than any lock. She lingered, one hand resting on the iron bar. A long breath, then nothing. Eventually she walked back to her car, slower now. Not dramatic, just unfinished. I stood there until the taillights vanished past the curve in the drive. She hadn't come to win me back. She'd come because she thought she still had leverage. But leverage only works when the person across the table still wants something from you. I didn't. Not her attention. Not her explanation. Not her regret. And certainly not her return. All she had left was memory. And that night, even that didn't open the gate. After the gate, she stopped trying. No more messages. No, we need to talk. Not even the usual late-night subtweets or vague LinkedIn reflections about resilience and self-worth. She didn't disappear, not all at once, but the edges of her presence began to fray. The panels pulled her quietly, one by one. Events she used to headline suddenly restructured their format. Startups that had tagged her as a strategic advisor removed her name without fanfare. A press release for a new fintech product quietly scrubbed her quote from the bottom of the page. I didn't call in favors. I didn't leak stories. People in this world don't need scandal to change direction, they need doubt. And once doubt takes hold, the vacuum fills itself. There was no official statement, no grand unraveling. Only a note, one I heard about secondhand from a managing partner at a mid-size firm I'd pitched 2 years earlier. He said it casually, over scotch at a quiet retreat Richard had insisted I attend. Her name showing up on no-go lists now. He said, not unkindly. Something about unclear IP use. Too much buzz, not enough build. I didn't respond. He didn't expect me to. Later that night, Aaron texted me a screenshot from an industry group chat he still monitored. One line. Anonymous submission. Charm gets you in the door. Trust keeps you in the room. No name attached. But everyone in that thread knew. Trust had dried up. Not from scandal, but from accumulation. A dozen small slights, half-truths, rebranded ideas, strategic omissions, none catastrophic, but together enough to erode the thing she needed most, belief. You can recover from mistakes. You can't recover from people deciding they can't trust you. Dalton's company posted a quarterly downturn. Not massive, not collapse, but noticeable. He issued a statement about refocusing internal priorities. She wasn't mentioned. They weren't seen together after that. Someone told me she tried to pivot into wellness, or maybe design. It didn't land. When momentum vanishes, so does the audience. And me? I didn't speak her name. I didn't explain what she took, or what she tried to bury. Because the house I stood in now, the work I was doing, the legacy I was restoring, was built too solid for bitterness. She had moved quickly, boldly, thought she'd leapt ahead. But legacies aren't given to those who arrive fast. They're left to those who remain when the dust settles. The signing was quiet. No cameras, no press. Just a room built for permanence, oak-paneled, air-still, history soaked into every fixture. Richard sat at the head of the long table, his posture as sharp as ever. The legal team flanked the side, flipping pages, murmuring clauses. Every document had been reviewed. Every word weighed. What remained was ceremony and transfer. He slid the pen across the table toward me. Gold trim. Heavy. You're not inheriting a business, he said, voice low but steady. You're inheriting the burden of doing it right. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just signed. Each page turned under my hand, the ink drying on terms that reshaped not only the structure of the family trust, but its direction. New holdings, new authority, new title. Chief Executive of the Myers Family Trust. Dalton wasn't present. Neither was Julia. They didn't need to be. This wasn't for them. When the final page was signed, Richard extended his hand. I took it. Let's begin the cleanup, I said. He didn't laugh. He just looked at me, eyes clearer than they had been in months, and said, You already have. Later, we stood together at the balcony that overlooked the estate's southern grounds, the same place where Julia had once tried to slip back in. Now, the lights below were being restructured, staff realigned, offices redrawn, partnerships reshaped to reflect new stewardship. Every move deliberate, every action mine. Aaron joined us briefly. He'd signed his own documents earlier, formalizing his position under the new trust structure. He glanced at me, then at Richard, and said only, It's solid. All of it. Richard nodded. It will hold. I didn't feel triumphant. Not in the way people expect. There was no elation, no rush. Just a clean shift. The kind of finality that comes with gravity. Julia had built her ascent on attention. But attention fades. This was different. This was ownership. Quiet. Absolute. As the sun lowered behind the tree line, Richard turned toward me, one last time. Don't waste energy proving them wrong, he said. Just keep proving yourself right. I stood there long after they left, sleeves rolled up, reviewing transition plans. I wasn't the man who lost something anymore. I was the one trusted to protect something larger than pride. And I would. Because I knew now. The only legacy worth claiming is the one no one can take from you. Victory, if you could call it that, didn't feel clean. I had the title, the authority, the estate, the weight of something generational handed down not through inheritance, but through belief. And still, some nights, I felt the hollow ache of everything that came before it. Because power doesn't erase a breach of trust. It just gives you something else to hold. I didn't miss her. Not in the way people expect. I didn't miss her voice or her smile or the way she used to trace circles on my shoulder when she pretended to care. What I missed was the version of myself that still believed her intentions were real. The man who once thought they were climbing together. That man had been quiet, hopeful, maybe naive. He didn't survive. There were days I'd walk the grounds, seeing traces of a life she never touched but nearly derailed. The greenhouse that Richard's late wife once restored. The piano in the West Wing she would have posted about but never played. Rooms with too much light for the kind of shadow she'd brought into mine. I started spending less time reading headlines and more time building out the next phase of the Trust's strategic plan. Legacy wasn't about holding power. It was about transferring strength without distortion. One evening, Aaron stopped by with 2 glasses of bourbon and asked if I ever thought about reaching out. Not to reopen anything, just to close it properly. I looked at the glass in his hand, then at the gate outside. She already closed it, I said. She just didn't expect it to stay locked. He nodded, didn't press. Healing, for me, came not through forgetting but through clarity. I saw everything now as it was. No distortion. No romantic overlay. The woman who left me wasn't tragic or evil. She was transactional. She didn't mislead me for love. She miscalculated a trade. And I survived it not because I fought harder, but because I didn't rush to fill the space she left behind. I let it stay empty. Let it echo. Let it remind me of who I used to be, and who I would never be again. I still wore the same watch. Still kept the same notebook on my desk. But now, every entry was sharper. Every plan tied to something longer than pride. Something that couldn't be taken with a borrowed smile or a hand on the next rung up. And maybe that was the real aftermath. Not retaliation, not disappearance, but stability. The kind that holds long after the noise fades.